So I just want to very quickly introduce Maria Martinez, who was here, previously did her PhD here. And I think she's going to tell us a little bit more today about what she's doing now and how we can get involved and hopefully collaborate between the organizations she's working for and CBCS. So I'll hand over to Maria. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Here. I'm going to apologize first because this is the first talk that I give in English since 2020, February 2020. So I think I lost track. So probably I will say words in Spanish so you can learn Spanish a bit. But yeah, I'm Maria. I think no one knows me. Jonathan knows me, Daniel, the other day. And I'm here because I talk to Hugh regularly. And I was inviting him to Chile. And then we figured out that it was easier for me to come. So he probably will come to Chile next year. So I came and I finished my PhD in 2017. So I will just give a broad overview. I finished a PhD where Jonathan was also my supervisor, Kerry Wilson, Hugh Bossingham, and I work on planning for the conservation and management of ecosystem services in Central Chile. I called them in that time ecosystem services. Now I call them nature contributions to people. So I finished in September 2017 and started a postdoc almost immediately, funded by the National Agency of Research and Development from Chile. They have been funding me since then. And I've been working mainly in Chile, in Patagonia. I'm working in the in the science policy interface. So I was doing my postdoc, but I was also coordinating a big assessment on it was the assessment of, I put it in Spanish, the assessment of conservation of the Chilean Patagonia. This was because in Patagonia, all the knowledge that we had a lot of knowledge, a lot of evidence, a lot of studies, but all was really fragmented. So we did like a systematic map of evidence to provide recommendations for conservation policy. It took us for ages. So I started in 2018 and we finished publishing like a Bible in last year. So, and I did my postdoc, then it was COVID, I got COVID, and I got my, I don't know, it's like a DECRA here. I started at the end of 2020, my research initiation grant. And I'm working at the moment on priority setting for biodiversity and nature contributions to people in land sea in Patagonia also. In last year, I started, well, we applied for this kind of like a seed, big fund with the Institute of Ecology and Biodiversity. And I started a role as a PI, where I'm leading a research program entitled Conservation and Human Wellbeing. I also, back in 2017, I started an editorial role in Ecosystems and People, which I love very much, my journal. It's a very friendly journal. And this year I started a role in environmental science and policy and ecology and society. So I'm very linked to policy and the science, and I work very close to NGOs and try to provide, try to translate the research to policymakers. So that's a challenge. So our group is a big group. We work mainly in Chile, but we have a focus in South America, Latin America. We are more than, I'm going to put it here. Here are very few. Barbara is here. Barbara is a postdoc in my lab. I forgot to present her today in morning tea, but she is a star. She does helps us a lot. But we have a very transdisciplinary group. we have sociologists, we have archaeologists, and we are trying to bridge the science policy gap to inform public policy, conservation planning, and also we have we're doing transdisciplinary efforts to do co-production of knowledge. So we are bridging between different disciplines, and we also, besides of leading this group, I'm also leading with 2 colleagues the gender equity agenda, because it was really forgotten. So we are pushing it, and we have a very like we have milestones defined, because for us it's super important to achieve equity and to bring, because it was I think I was even invited to kind of, because now the institutions are asking for parity. They are asking to have females and in early career stages. So we are trying to do mentorship to our female colleagues and bring her in different, yeah, we're trying to bring inclusivity to our program. So why conservation and human well-being? And I'm gonna just to give a little background. This Institute of Ecology and Biodiversity started ages ago. In 2000, they had a big fund for 10 years, finished in 2010, and they kind of then they became a corporation. They did a little bit of consultancy, and they were applying, and they didn't get a big fund until the 2021, when we started this new phase of the Institute of Ecology and Biodiversity, but it was really basic science. So the idea of this program is to try to bridge different disciplines, different epistemologies, to build solutions, and not just solutions for conservation, but to bring social capital, collaboration, and create innovative and creative dialogues between ecology, social sciences, humanities, and policy. So we think the biodiversity crisis hasn't been addressed in a proper way. We aren't curbing the biodiversity extinction trends. So we need to change the focus, so we have a more a people-centered approach to generate positive conservation outcomes for both, for people and for biodiversity. So that's our focus. So, and mainly because conservation has been seen as a solution, but for people, it hasn't been always that way, because many times there's problems in access to natural resources, there's evictions from protected areas. So in the discourse, it's always like a solution. It's something that it will be positive, but that's not the case. So we understand that there's a need for evidence and relevant metrics to monitor and quantify the links between conservation and the different dimensions of human well-being. So we have three big themes. We have the public policy governance, and we are asking questions about how to build collaborative governance models for the long-term sustainability of social ecological systems. In Chile, we have not just protected areas. We had in Spanish we said OMEC, but I know it's different in English. Other figures of not traditional conservation, but we have other policies. How do you say that? OSCMs. And we have several policies: territorial user rights for fisheries. We have spatial coastal spaces for indigenous people. We have multiple areas for multiple use, for coastal areas for multiple use. So we have different strategies that are being created to enforce community-led conservation. So for us, that's very interesting. We also have this line of conservation planning that I'm not going to mention much because I know you're the experts, but we ask where, how, and when we need to make decisions in landscapes and seascapes, and how we prioritize not just sites, but actions to be more effective. And we also ask what are the strategies that are more efficient to promote not just biodiversity conservation outcomes, but also social outcomes. And finally, we have this, that it's kind of a transversal for all. It's the co-production of knowledge. And we are asking how can we collaborate in a better way with society, with the private sector, with the public sector, with local communities to move to more participatory and inclusive knowledge co-production models. So that's, and now I'm going to talk about the title of my presentation. So I'm giving all this overview to say that this is just a part of this public policy and conservation governance. And this is kind of awkward because when I was writing this paper, I was pretty sure that we were going to have a new constitution. I flew to Australia on Sunday. We had a big plebiscite on Sunday, September 4, and we lost it. It was rejected. We had a document, a written constitution that was going to give rights to nature, but not just that, it was going to give access to nature to all people. And for me, it was very interesting because when the constitution was being written, we had a paper with Jonathan on inequality of access to nature. And they were using that paper to write this new article in the Constitution. So I did my PhD here, and I work in decision-making processes and how to influence decision-making processes. And for me, it was like the highlight of my life to have an article that was citing my paper. It was depressing, but I think we will still write. We will still write a new constitution, and we need to have the evidence behind. So the rights of nature has been kind of understudied by the scientific community. It has been more like for environmental movements. And it has been a legal mechanism and conceptual mechanism to recognize nature as a right holder. And a growing number of countries, a growing number of jurisdictions around the world are recognizing the rights of nature. And this has been focused mainly in Latin America. And we think that this may better protect nature through, but questions remain about the contributions. And we need to have a view on these different disciplines to test the effectiveness of these rights of nature. So we had a very nice article. I don't remember the number of the article, but mainly gave nature a right to be respected as and protected as a human being. So that's very new. And they also defined different natural assets that were considered like the components of nature, like wetlands, glaciers, beaches. They have like a different typology of ecosystems that were considered natural assets. And yeah, and something very interesting with I don't know if you have read the last IPBES report on multiple values. They just it was published this year. They just recommended, they just offered, it was in the literature way before, but they offered a typology of new paradigms of life. So to understand our relationships with nature. And they defined 4 paradigms: living from nature, living in nature, where you recognize the intrinsic value of nature, the intrinsic value of biodiversity; living with nature, where you recognize the benefits that nature give to human well-being; and also living as nature, that we are part of the same thing. So this type of policy instruments may be very, may or may not be useful to recognize these new paradigms of life that are in the cosmovisions of many indigenous groups, for example, in different countries. So I started reviewing the literature. It was just Rights of Nature in Easy Web of Knowledge, and not many literature came out. But there has been, I don't remember, the Harmony of Nature, the UN is doing a big initiative on eco-jurisdictions. They even have a website, and they have been reviewing different policy initiatives that are not published in the peer review literature. And they have reviewed almost 409 legal initiatives. And they have it mapped this year, and they have provide all the database. Yeah, so we explore the implications of the implementations of the rights of nature in different parts of the world to see what lessons can we learn if we apply it in Chile. So it has been since it has been applied since I don't know, since 20 years ago. It has been started to apply. Ecuador is the only country that has it in its constitution since 2008. They recognized the rights of nature. But it has been a bit tricky because the definition of nature is quite abstract. They define it as the mother nature. That it's okay because we all have different cosmovisions, we all have different knowledge systems, but it has been a little bit tricky to understand who is the right holder. You know? In Bolivia also, it has been recognized the law of the rights of Mother Earth, and the same. It has been really, it's a very plurinational indigenous view, and it's a bit abstract to define these natural components from this definition. In New Zealand, probably you know better than me, in New Zealand, it's also been recognized by a treaty settlement in 2017, where a law was declared that recognized the river and the whole ecosystem, the whole from the sea to the land, no, from the land to the sea, as a legal person that has both rights and duties. So it has been applied, for example, in the US, it has been mainly by local initiatives, not as a constitution. So it was, we were very hopeful that Chile was going to be the second constitution to recognize the rights of nature. And then if we see the types of legal initiatives, that mainly it has been applied as local regulations. And this has been focused in Brazil and in the US. And it has been the dominant legal type that has been applied. And initiatives in Ecuador and in Colombia have been dominated by court decisions, for example. So, well, I have another one. No. So what are the implications? So, for example, Ecuador and Bolivia, or South America, has been a real pioneer on recognizing the rights of nature. But it hasn't been that effective on halting the biodiversity crisis. I think we argue that a fundamental issue to operationalize the rights of nature is to define the right bearer, is to include the scientific evidence to clearly define how we are going to define nature, what are the components. Our constitution did quite a good job because we defined as natural assets as common goods, including seascapes, including fondo marino, bottom sea, rivers, free-flowing rivers, glaciers, wetlands, atmosphere, protected areas, native forest, the soil, and everything that can be declared by law. So it was kind of open, and another thing that has to be very important is to specify how nature may claim its rights. It's a guardian, or the state. It's going to be a steward of these rights, or are we going to develop a new institution that is going to be representative of litigation on behalf of nature? Also, one thing that is very important is to specify how conflicts between rights and nature are going to be addressed, for example. And I think when people and corporations have rights and nature does not have rights, probably it's going to be, probably biodiversity and nature, it's going to lose. So that's why I think it's very important, and it's a nice instrument. So that's the nature rights. I'm not sure if you wanna ask now, or do you want me to finish my presentation, because I wanna show you. I did a selection of issues that I think might be interest to you, that my lab is developing. So Barbara here, you leave the questions at the end. Okay. So this is part of my grant that Barbara and Luis Tarsi, that also did his PhD and now is in Chile. We are a group, and we are doing an habitat risk, as we already developed, and we are, we have to submit it very soon, an habitat risk assessment of multiple stressors in marine protected areas of Chile. And this is because we are working with the NGOs in the National Corporation of Forests that it's responsible to develop the management plans. We want to inform the management plans because now they are using the open standards for conservation. I don't know if you are familiar with the open standards, but the open standard, it's something that's being applied in Chile and have clear stages to develop management plans where you define the conservation of, you define the performance. No, it's not the performance, it's the performance of these conservation objects, and you define which are the major threats to these conservation objects or features. It's conservation planning, and but every threat is analyzed independently. So we took this super simple model that defines risk in function of two axes, that the exposure to risks and the consequence of that risk to habitats, marine habitats. In this case, we didn't have much information, but we had the giant kelp forest that was the giant kelp forest map that was developed by Alejandra Mora. She's a Chilean scientist that did this global map, and she did her fieldwork in Patagonia. And we collect and we compile all the threats that could be mapped. So we took the fishing pressure, we took the agriculture concessions, we took also climate change scenarios, RCP 4.5 and 8.5. And we run this model based on consequence and exposure, and we build different scenarios considering climate change or not considering climate change. And now I'm showing you my study area, but we focused on 3 protected areas that are here. It's Parque Nacional Isla Magdalena, Huaytecas, and Cahuéscar. So you will see they're very long, they're very big, and there are some issues also because these are terrestrial protected areas. But because I've been working since I finished my PhD here, we took, my colleagues took the decrees of these protected areas and recognized that these areas are in the fjords, there were areas, there was a coastal space that is protected. But since 2000, or I think maybe earlier, they have been granting aquaculture concessions in the coastal protected space. So we have a conflicts between multiple uses and conservation. So what we did, it's very simply that also we overlapped these different sea uses in the coastal space of protected areas. And we found out that, I will summarize it as we have more than 400 concessions in the coastal protected space. But when the managers are doing the management plans, they just overlap the concessions and they don't consider, for example, the aquaculture fleet that is associated to that pressure. So we mapped it and now we are delivering that. We take our time and try to explain to the managers how can they use it in the development of the management plan. So we also take this information and try to transfer it in the process of the development of the management plans of the protected areas. So they have more evidence because usually with the open standards, they do the overlap and they say, 3% of the area is in the coastal space, so the threat is very low. But when you consider other threats, it's not that low. It's actually very threatening. Also, Sara Garcia Morales Hurtado, she's from Spain. She's doing a PhD. She's just starting. She just got her PhD in the University of Lisboa, and she is going to be working on the blue realm under a changing climate. And she mainly will be investigating two potential operational approaches: adaptive management and anticipatory zoning, to promote and to incorporate also climate change in the marine spatial planning processes. So she will be working also in the area that we are interested. And then in the co-production of knowledge, I'm just going, this is not, it's a very, I did a selection of projects that I think are probably going to be interesting to you. And then it's Juan Silva, who is a sociologist, and we are already working for a year, I think, already. And he is a practitioner, actually. He did his master in he's a sociologist from Chile, but did his master's in environmental science and management at the University of California. And he recently, he started this year in April, he started a Coastal Solution Fellowship at the Cornell University. I'm not sure if you are familiar with these fellowships, but these are fellowships that are focused on Latin American practitioners and are focused on solutions and mainly in important biodiversity areas. So we are working in a wetland in the Mataquito River. This is in central Chile. And we are mainly doing, this is a big project that's entitled Strengthening the Resilience Capacity of Mataquito River. And I'm supervising Juan in doing the mapping of conservation features and threats, but mainly through participatory mapping. So he's the sociologist, he goes to the, he does a lot of workshops, and he's identifying objects and threats, and we are mapping it. But the important thing here is that we are, at the end, this is a 2-year fellowship, and at the end, we are gonna be developing all the documentation to present it to this area to get an official recognition for conservation as a natural sanctuary. So we're very policy oriented. And finally, and this is we work with an artist, and Francisca Cárcamo, and we are also very worried and very concerned, and we care very much about communicating our science. And we are going to do this big workshop, and our objective is to improve creative scientific communication to a diverse audience using different formats, comics. I even have a student that is doing a master's in cinemas. Yeah, and she's doing a documentary about people and nature relationships. So we're doing, and also I have another probably a postdoctoral researcher that's going to start, and she's an archaeologist, and she's so I'm very interested. She's studying fires historically, so she's doing ethnographics, and yeah, she's doing very social oriented work too. So all the figures that are in my presentation, Francisca does it, and she does little magazines that we print and we give up to people so we can do a better impact in communication outreach. So challenges, the main challenge is to actually influence decision making and its outcomes. And yeah, I come here and it's nice to say, but there's a huge problem with fake news. And I think there's a movement that doesn't like in Chile, in the world, the indigenous communities, indigenous knowledge. So it's a bit of a challenge when you have a OMEC, I'm going to say it in Spanish because I don't know where that are, for example, the spatial, we have a policy that was written in 2018, that it's the Lafkenche law, that creates spatial areas for indigenous people. And the objective of this instrument is to conserve and to maintain traditional uses of marine resources. But one of the objectives is also conservation. But there's a huge problem because there's a conflict with the industry, and they are kind of stigmatized as terrorists, and yeah, and so we have issues that are very complex to solve. So I think communication is important because no one knows about this instrument. It's from 2008, and I found out in, I don't know, 3 years ago that we had this law. And if you look at the map, all the spatial areas that are being asked have not been granted, just a very few. So it's a very tricky process. We also are worried about mapping stakeholders involved in science policy interface. That's why we collaborate and have an open dialogue between individuals from science. And I think the effective transfer of evidence, it's key to make an impact in decision making. So I think that's a very summary of what we are doing. We have a website. My lab has a website. Yeah, I showed a summary of our students. I'm not. We have. I have students that are working mainly on management plans, are involved in these different projects, mapping conservation features, mapping threats, making sustainable zoning scenarios. We also are starting to work with e-naturalists to map, to map like the intrinsic value of biodiversity and how it correlates with different components of the landscape. That's Claudio, there's Pablo, who is working with Juan, and Daniela Stay, who is doing her master in, I don't want to, yeah, because probably they are watching, so I want to mention all. Who else? Who else? I didn't mention. Sarah? Who else? Catarina, Victoria, yeah. And I'm also working with Catarina. We were spending the weekend. Probably she will come and finish her PhD. She was going to work in Patagonia because she did her Fulbright in Patagonia, but with all the pandemic, she couldn't go, but probably she will come to Chile in to finish her PhD. I took her to finish at my house. I live in front of the beach, so everyone is invited. They're gonna come. And what else? It's that we just started this. We are looking for collaborations. We are very excited about transdisciplinary science. I'm editing a lot, more than I want to edit. But yeah, I'm very interested in research that is clearly linked to policy. So I think that's it. Yeah, and I'm also working with some colleagues from Oregon. Well, we just started a collaboration, and we are trying to learn how to incorporate human well-being indicators in conservation plan. So I think that's probably all what I'm doing. Yeah, and also we have a project with archaeologists, and we are working on biocultural landscapes on shell middens. In Chile, we have along the whole coast, we have shell middens, but they are invisible to all. And we think that making it visible, it will help for their conservation. So we are writing a paper about that. And I think that's it. I think, yeah, that's it. So, yeah.